Welcome. This is the Cisco CCNA ENSA, also known as the Enterprise Networking Security and Automation course. This course focuses on the CCNA version 7 curriculum. This is course 3 of 3. Alright, moving on. Let's go ahead and let's talk about router and switch file maintenance. First of all, Cisco has what's known as an IFS, the Cisco iOS file system. We can do a lookup basically by going to the exec mode and typing show file system. As long as there's content there, we should be able to see content that is shown on the system. This is what is shown for a Cisco 4221. However, anything in the flash memory or on the disk, if there's directories or anything like that, should be here. If we want to navigate, we could do a dir, and that will show us our directories. That will show us the content. You can see which action items are directories, and you can see the permissions that are given: read, write, execute. We can navigate by doing our CD and the appropriate directory. We can also see our working directory by PWD, or present working directory. So pretty common CLI commands. Again, if we're wanting the same thing on a switch, we could do a show file system from a switch, and you can see what files are there. This actually is extremely important when you purchase a new switch and you're curious if there is any VLAN data that is still on the switch, because there will be a VLAN.dat file here if there is. So how do you back up certain commands? How do you back up certain devices? Well, you can actually do a show run, and you can log that information and you can export it. You'd have to do some cleanup, so things like encrypted passwords, stuff like that, would have to be verified. But this is definitely a way to back up a configuration of a device. If you're doing it, again, go to the terminal, do a show run, copy all the text out of it, and you should be good. However, that's one way. You can also do a dump from the running config to a TFTP server. Basically, what you would do is copy running config, TFTP, hit enter. It will ask you the host address. It will give you the ability to put a name in, and then as long as it is set up, it will copy over. Again, we should have labs covering TFTP, and we do. We can also have USB ports on more current devices. For example, the 4321 has USB connectivity, so you can actually plug in a flash drive. How do you back it up to a flash drive? Copy running config, USB flash 0, and you can dump the configuration to a flash drive that way. Again, if you want to view the contents of a flash drive that's plugged in, you would do directory, give it the location or the path to the directory that you want to look at. You could also change directories to that if you wished, and then you could see the content of the files that way. Password recovery procedure. This is always the good one. This is actually one of the ones that is extremely important. Essentially, there are 6 main steps for password recovery. First, enter ROM on mode. You need to change the configuration of a registry. From there, it will reboot, and you can load a startup config. You basically load the startup config to the running config. You can then see the password, or you have the ability to remove the password. That's step 4. You save the running config to the startup config, reload the device, password reset or recovered. Alright, so that was a quick rundown. So let's go a little slower. First of all, when you're booting the device, it's a certain key button combo that you're going to have to hit. This will allow the device to enter the ROM on mode. It will actually boot to a ROM on prompt, so ROM on TAC 1. From there, we need to configure the register to be 0x 0x2142. And we do that by doing a config reg 0x2142. Hit enter. That will get you into a ROM on 2. From there, you would hit reset. The register that is set to 0x2142 basically says to load the starting config, or to load the device with just a standard config and give you access. From there, you would copy the startup config to the running config. That bypasses the password function. You'd be allowed to configure the terminal, and from there, you're at a global configuration. You can change the password. Once you change the password, you want to save it again, so a copy run start, and reload the device. That is normally how you do it. However, one thing you definitely need to do is you need to reconfigure the registry with a config tac registry to 0x2102. That's the normal registry mode and not the bypass mode. Load the device and then it will boot normally. If you do not reset the registry, it will keep bypassing the configuration file and load a blank config. We have a lab about backup files. We have a lab about configuring basic device emulation and restoring files. And we have a lab doing a lot more with TFTP. Our last major section is about iOS management. So how do we upgrade a device on a Cisco router? Well, with TFTP, we would back up the iOS. We would verify that we can communicate with the iOS where we're going to be storing that device. So if we're putting it on a TFTP server, we want to be able to ping the TFTP server. We also want to make sure that we can communicate with it. We always want to make a backup copy of the Cisco iOS device just in case something becomes corrupted. We have encountered this. I have encountered this. So you always want to make a backup copy just in case. Ping the server, verify the appropriate image size. You could do a show flash if you need to. You would copy the image to the TFTP server, and from there we can move forward. So how do we copy it from a local device to our TFTP server? You could do copy running config TFTP and then give it the appropriate information. That's how you copy it to the TFTP server. If we want to copy from the TFTP server, you would do a copy TFTP : // and from there it will ask you the IP address and the file name. From there you can reload. So let's say you do this process. Now you have two iOS devices, or two iOS config. You have two iOS files on your device. How do you configure it so that it will load the specific one you want? Well, you're going to have to tell the device to boot to the right iOS. So you'd be doing from the global configuration, use the boot system command. You would tell it it's a flash, and you'd give it the appropriate iOS file. I know it's an iOS, it's a configuration file, but it ends with a .bin. This will tell the device what file to load. Then save it, reload it, and it will load the new iOS. And that is it for this module. If you got any questions or concerns, please reach out. Thank you.